This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you!
Boring. Boring. Boring.
You got it. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
I call again for immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Hello, one and all. Lembit Öpik here on Lembit Öpik Live. There's a clue in the name. On Unprecedented TV, the station that finds the facts, kills the spin, and tells it like it is as best we can. Assess it. We worship facts, we nurture opinions, and we trust our audience. You are that audience, and you are brave enough to trust yourself to make judgments on the facts. That's why the facts are so important here. I lament the fact that the mainstream media seem to have abandoned those. They are all, as far as I can see, activist reporters now. They decide what they want you to believe, and then they give you very selected information, or misinformation, I'd suggest at times, to take you along that route. Anyway, you don't get that here. It's pretty much a cardinal sin to lie, to misrepresent facts. But of course, as you know, my presenters can say anything that they want, as long as they highlight that it's their opinion. Now, today we're going to talk about an awkward and uncomfortable subject, and one which has been ignored by the government. The abandonment of 5.2 million abuse victims in the United Kingdom. That's right, over 5 million abuse victims who are basically written out of the political script of the current government. Who are these abuse victims, you might ask? Women and girls? No, think again. Men and boys. The whole agenda by Labour is to stop violence against women and girls to such an extent they've got a minister specifically identified to do that. And therein lies the problem. Today we're going to explore the fact that, and I think this is a fact, that abuse isn't exclusively meted out against women and girls. It's meted out by abusers to abuse victims. This is not a gender issue. There is, it seems, a differential level of abuse between men and women. It seems more women suffer it than men. But nevertheless, 5.2 million men, it's estimated, in the United Kingdom have suffered some form of abuse. Why is the government not talking about stopping abuse against abuse victims? Why do they have to make a sexist, sexually discriminating comment? It might even be illegal what they're doing. So in the show today, I'm going to return to a subject that I've discussed before and we'll discuss again with a friend, an actual presenter here on Unprecedented TV, and that's Marilyn Hawes. Marilyn, good to see you. And I hope that wasn't too ranty.
No. Well, let's rant. Let's shame people. Let's absolutely shame people, because it is shame. It is shameful. And the reason they focus on violence against women and girls, because it's everybody else's mantra, and they don't have the intellect to actually look at the general subject of abuse and what goes on within that abuse. And that's really what annoys me. I was on a program the other day when I actually was having to say, hang on a bit, do you actually understand that within the abuse, there will always be animal abuse. There's always, if there's domestic abuse, somebody is going to be sexually abused. About 75% of the children in that situation are also abused, or they're in the line of a missile coming across the room. So it's much wider than one single gender. And it's not about gender. It's about the horrendous impact that it has emotionally. I have been 19 years in domestic abuse. I never occurred to me. I was the deputy head. I was always smiling, always coping. I was like running scared inside. My stomach was always churning. I lost a tremendous amount of weight. I was so skinny. But I always had this veneer of, look at me, aren't I a happy person? That professional face. And underneath it, all this stuff was going on, and no one actually, I didn't even realize that I was being sexually abused I knew it was weird. And then when someone said to me, "Oh, that actually goes with domestic abuse," I went, no. I just thought it was weird. And I thought, actually, and then this lady said to me, "No, actually, it wasn't just weird, darling. You were actually being raped." And I went, "Oh," and you don't want to think about that. And that experience I had of avoidance and having to hide away, and I had agoraphobia. It was just dreadful. I didn't want people to see through my veneer or actually use my vulnerability. So I had this always bonny look about me, and that in itself is a strain. And after a while, people would say, "Well, how are you?" And I couldn't even say, "I'm fine." It was too much energy. I'd just say, "Okay." And that isn't just about me. That happens to every single person who's abused. That's the men as well that feel exactly the same. And the fear of what's going to happen to my kids, what's going to happen to my house. I lost my house, and I lost my house. I had a beautiful home. I lost that. I had to walk away from that. The men feel the same. And it's their absolute ignorance and lack of informed information. Jess Phillips should be shot, quite frankly.
Let's come back to Jeff in a minute. You said that you've been a victim of abuse for 19 years. There's another thing which people need to know about you. You run Freedom from Abuse as the chief executive. Tell us about that charity, and then let's talk about Jess Phillips.
Well, that's really came off the back of my own children during the time when I was going through the domestic abuse, and my boss, who was the head teacher, was, "Oh, look, I can help you. But of course, all that time he'd been hanging around in the wings, grooming me, which I didn't realize what that was, even as a teacher, because all the courses I'd been on were all about the funny man in the park. No one talked about interfamilial abuse. No one talked about sexual abuse at all. So I just didn't even cross my mind that some of the things he did was frankly sort of a bit weird, but I never knew what it was. So I think really when eventually he walked away from court, having said he was guilty, and I thought, "I don't think so, pal. You're going down, mate." And I was actually the first person in the country ever to have got a case into the High Court of Appeal without ever using a lawyer. And anyone can do that, but they don't. But I was so angry. I was just galvanized into, you completely betrayed me. You completely, you are... It was just awful. Every single emotion. I wrote a book about it. The betrayal, the denial. I was suicidal because I was thinking. It was going through this on top of having had 19 years of abuse. Was just too much, and I had a nervous breakdown, and I had my suicide date all booked. I knew exactly what I was going to do, which in hindsight now was just dreadful but I know so many people do go that way, and because I just thought I married the wrong man. I've now gift wrapped my children to a paedophile, and now they've been abused, and it was just horrendous. And I thought, you know what? I've obviously made some terrible decisions. I'm better off dead. And I honestly thought I was doing them a favor. And that's what a lot of domestic victims feel like. And so this charity began from, what does grooming look like? I started going into prisons and talking to paedophiles because I thought, well, I want to understand, are you born like it? No, you're not. No abuser is born like it. You are not born to abuse in any way whatsoever. It's to do with what went on in your early years. It's a lot to do with your emotional intelligence, and it's a whole conversation we could have about this. But I felt so passionate, having spoken to the prisoners and what I was learning and what I was researching, that I started doing training courses. And then as time went on, I realized, well, you can't just keep talking about the sexual abuse of children. What about domestic abuse? What about parents who are abused by their children? What about the elderly that are abused? What about the children that are abused in the gangs? And so it's now freedom from abuse. If we can prevent it, we can free people up from being targeted in the first place. And even you can be freed up from the abuse itself. There is help out there. There's a lot of it. Survival is about resilience, and we can all be resilient. I mean, I would prefer it if people were born like it. I would prefer it if parents were more encouraging of their children to say, okay, you're going to fall over. you know, but it's how you roll with the punches. You know, stuff happens. We all have terrible, terrible times in our life, but do we just go and throw ourselves off a cliff, or do we find it within ourselves to keep powering forward? And this is the same for the men and the boys.
So let's talk about men and boys, because we get all of this endless reportage about violence against women and girls. You said that you weren't too pleased with this woman who looks rather inadvisedly smug in this picture. It says, every child deserves to grow up safe, and we will do whatever it takes to make that a reality. And then Jess Phillips, MP, Minister for Safeguarding and Violence Against Women and Girls. Why, if she means every child, doesn't it say and violence against victims? Why doesn't it say violence against? Why does it have to say women and girls? Because I put it to you, the issue here is that people like her just don't understand this issue is not about gender. It's about mindset. And whether you're a man or a woman, you can be an abuser. Whether you're a man or woman, you can be abused. And when they go, this drives me crazy. When they go on and on and on about violence against women and girls, I scream at the TV, because the 5.2 million who are being ignored, abandoned, actually told that you haven't got a problem, they're the men.
Yeah, it is absolutely appalling. I wrote a course because I thought, well, this problem with abuse against abuse, you know, toxic relationships, let's call it that, is towards boys and towards teenagers. And you don't suddenly become a domestic abuser. You are already that person as a child. You are already being toxic in the playground. You are already being a very nasty person, and you just grow up, and as you grow older you become even more nastier, because it's a mindset. It's an absolute mindset. And when I've done this course with toxic relationships in school, and this is something that teachers shouldn't even get close or near to, because they all want to harp on about misogyny, which is absolutely emasculating, discriminatory. Girls can be as bad as boys, and girls are utterly vile, and they fight viciously with their nails and all sorts of stuff, you know, like all that. They're horrible. And I find at the end of these courses, and the children or teenagers will come and talk to me, it's the boys that come forward. Every time is a queue of young lads of 16, 18, whatever, who are in these relationships that they didn't realize that what these girls were doing, gaslighting, being manipulative, you know, looking at their emails, looking at their phone, being controlling, all that stuff they didn't realize. And that's the problem. That's why I feel passionately about explaining to children what a toxic relationship looks like. That, you know, because I had a happy childhood. So when I, you know, met my then husband, I didn't know. It was weird, but I didn't know what, because if you've been in a good relationship as a child, you don't know what a toxic one looks like. And if you've been brought up in a toxic relationships in a family, you don't know what a happy one looks like. So there's all this distortion going on. And the only way you can change it is by proper education, sitting down with the kids and having a real good conversation with them about what's going on in their lives, trying to understand. I feel really sorry for boys. I think boys and men are lost. I really do. And I spoke to Mark Brooks. He came on my program. He's the chairman of Mankind, and he was explaining to me, and I knew it was bad, but he told me there are only 400 safe spaces in the whole of the UK for a refuge space
before you
for a man to go to.
Let's talk about that in a minute. I actually want to do that after the break. Did you talk with Mark Brooks about this woman, about Jess Phillips, or did it not come up?
Yes.
What does he think?
Oh, it shouldn't be imposed. It's absolutely dreadful. There's no one there do not understand what abuse means, that it is nothing to do with gender. It is to do with a distorted mindset, and that is what's got to be eradicated. But even if she believes in her mantra there, violence against women and girls and helping children, they're not. They're not. Children in this country are just abandoned to get on with it. We are Nelson Mandela, he's so right. He said every country will be judged by how they treat their children. We suck. We really, truly suck. No one gives a monkey's really in this country. These are all absolute empty words. They amount to nothing because what you say should come out in actions, and the actions are not there. You come out and you discriminate boys and say, oh, they're all going to go on misogyny, because for goodness sake, I mean, I saw it again the other day, and I text Mark Brooks and I said, oh look at this, here we go again. And I just rolled my eyes up, and I just thought, this is just outrageous.
Well, after the break, I want to talk about misogyny and something called misandry. We'll talk about the definitions later. And I also want to talk about what should be happening, and more about Mankind, which is a charity which is explicitly set up to try to right the wrong of sexual imbalance in the treatment of abuse victims. Now, before we go further, Tim Scott Uncancelled is going great guns by popular demand. We're showing him a lot more now. Take a look at this. That's unmissable television. He finds the headlines and the stories that you may have missed. He buys the papers so that you don't have to. Tim Scott Uncancelled. And please do remember to subscribe to Unprecedented TV on YouTube. Ever-growing numbers there. Please join us. It's free. And then you get access to everything that we do. And that is a very large and hopefully delightful set of programs. Now back to my guest today and fellow presenter, actually, the Chief Executive Officer of Freedom from Abuse, and that's Marilyn Hawes. And we're talking about the total bias which the government's showing. They talk about stopping violence against women and girls, but nothing about men and boys. Here's something which somebody wrote, the Alliance for racial justice. Dear Prime Minister, we must begin by being clear. Violence against women and girls, whoever the perpetrator, must be addressed consistently and with resolve. Well, that's not really a racial issue, is it? I'm surprised in a way that an organization like that didn't get it right. It should be violence against victims. You should get rid of women and girls, victims. But this is typical of the kind of reportage you get. It's riddled all over the press, all over the media. And it makes it, in my view, more difficult for those who experience, as men, violence against men and boys to comment. And, of course, you've seen this everywhere. Tackling violence against women and girls. I think I may have told you, I was going through Victoria Station recently, and I saw this big sign, something like that. So, will you help us stop violence against women and girls? And I was annoyed by it. And I looked at it, and the man said, the policeman said, would you like a leaflet? I said, no, I don't want it. Well, why are you looking at it? I said, what are you doing about violence against all victims? And he didn't understand what I meant. I said, why are you sexually discriminating against male victims of abuse? Oh, no, we're just doing this today. We'll do that on another day. Would you like to help? And I was so angry because he wasn't. I didn't believe him. I think that they just hadn't considered it. Why on earth should they have an entire stand about women and girls? Why separate it? It's not even logical, and it's an insult. Why didn't they start with men and boys then? So many things wrong with what they said, Marilyn. So,
no, it is dreadful. It is absolutely dreadful because, again, when you talk to Mark Brooke, I mean, I know from
that's the head of Mankind initiative.
Mankind, sorry, the chairman of Mankind. Yeah, I mean, it is it is the only charity in the UK that can actually help, and they really do help. And I had a recent case, and I tell you how far they reached out and stepped forward. There was a young lad, 21 years old. I'm not saying where or when, but this is a very recent story. And he was in a toxic relationship with his girlfriend. She was 18, he was 21. And they'd had a child together, and they weren't married or anything like that. And he lived at home with his mum, and he was being beaten up by her. He hid all the bruises, he hid the scratches and stuff, everything. And then she took him to court, and she took him to court because she wanted to get him stuck up with some sort of criminal conviction, right? So they get to the court, and she turns up with a black eye. And apparently it turned out that her friend had done this to her, helped her put this young boy in prison. So he's in prison now. He's on bail, on remand in prison, trying to get bail to come out. He gets into prison, and his grandma rang me and his mum and said he is the nicest, loveliest boy. And this woman has been an absolute piece of work from the moment he met her. And he never said, he was embarrassed because he was a boy, a young man, embarrassed to tell anyone that this girl was doing this to him. And he's still there in prison, and he's on antidepressants. He gets PTSD, all caused by this woman's behavior, and she is utterly vile. Now, the fact remains is he's not even allowed out on bail because they're saying that, if he comes out, he's obviously, listen to this, he'll do what all men do. He'll start again. He's innocent, but isn't it that all men do? And I know from the figures I know, there is a minuscule percentage. There's as many boys in toxic relationships as there are girls. Why should that be any different when you go forward into your adult life? It is equal. And Mark Brooks from Chairman of Mankind said to me when we discussed it, and I said, well, the figures are like such a narrow margin between the boys and the girls in toxic relationships that surely can't have changed when they get into grown-ups. He said, no, it's not. There's no difference. There's no difference. It's just that nobody talks about the men. And it's awful. And it's awful. And I've got on Friday, or coming on my show later on this week, I've got Professor Jane Monckton-Smith, and she's going to be talking about domestic homicide. Well, I was talking to her yesterday, and she was saying, in fact, what's way and far above taking over domestic homicide is suicide by domestic abuse, because people can't find their way out. They just, and she said, you know that some people will do that because they'd rather do that than be killed by the partner. They'll do it themselves. Thank you very much. But that's the whole distortion and the depression and the anxiety. It is absolutely dreadful. And to have nothing on the agenda for men and boys is, I think it's against the law, because we are not allowed to discriminate. And you'll see anything in the government, anything to do with domestic abuse, sexual abuse, whatever, perpetrators of this, whatever, you will see Women's Aid on every panel of any sort of select committee or anything to discuss it. There's always Women's Aid are there. So the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, I don't think Mark Brooks is on that, but Women's Aid are on it. And that's wrong. She is the Domestic Abuse Commissioner, and she should be shouting from the rooftops, we have got to do more for men and boys. And I mean, we need men. We need men to be men. I don't understand this thing with women. I think it's gone back to too much women's liberation and women thinking they can be as good as men. Who wants to be? It's ridiculous.
Well, hang on, what do you mean by as good as men, though? I was with you all the way there. I think we're different. I think there's a problem when men and women want to be the same. Or women were meant to be the same, and vice versa, because there is a very clear, not just biological, but sociological benefit in having the two.
Absolutely.
It's obvious to me as a parent, having a male role model and a female role model is very valuable. What I'm worried about, what I really, really dislike, is the same thing that you said, where being masculine is implied as somehow toxic. There's this horrendous series which was being feted and given awards all the time, Adolescence, which incidentally misrepresents the person it's based on, but that's another story. The series forcing us to talk about toxic masculinity, this horrendous, reprehensible phrase, which has now been brought in, which causes people to say, well, if you're masculine, it can be toxic. And there's an inference. They go further. Of course, some men behave in a toxic way, as do some women. But it's like suddenly we've got this disease, which is that you're too masculine.
But I talk to the children in schools about. I actually say to the boys, because what about toxic femininity? Never has anyone ever said that. Toxic femininity. What about that? But I actually do talk to the boys because I don't think there are enough decent male role models. Some of the dads do just like, you know, leave everything to the mum. There are men like that, but I think the men need to have more discussions with their sons about what masculinity means. And I'll say to the boys, what does it mean? You tell me what it means. And they like, well, I don't know what you mean. I said, no, that's the problem, isn't it? I said, you probably think, I don't know, I might be wrong, but think you've got to be macho. No, you don't. I said, it's about being protective. You can be gentle, you can be respectful, but you are there to support and protect. You don't have to be controlling. You don't go around pushing your weight around. That is not masculine. That's being a bully. Yeah. You know, a masculine man is, you know, not a weak man. You know, they can be protective, as I say, which doesn't mean controlling. And you understand, you know, hook yourself onto admire some sportsman who you like or think that is a good role model. But you see, the thing is for the boys, which today is unfortunately, you have got Andrew Tate barking off in the corner, and there's a lot of boys that buy into that mantra. And it's very destructive, very destructive. And then you've got the impact of pornography. That the boy is 1 in 4 boys, and it is boys. 1 in 4 boys are watching pornography at age 10 and 11, and 1 in 3 from 12 and 13. And there's a lot, and that's a terrible, terrible distortion on their minds. And you can't unsee what you've seen. And they think, I said, there's nothing normal about pornography. You're not going to get. That's not a relationship. That's not how it works, love. And that has not helped the boys at all with some of the bad behaviour in schools.
So just going back to this programme, I think it's really bad. Keir Starmer, as usual, got it wrong. He thought it was a documentary. He literally said it was a documentary. And then they start sending it around schools. This is actually reinforcing the idea that abuse is something males do to females. I haven't watched. I've watched a bit of it, and I loathed it because it was just reinforcing everything that this weird neo-wokeism wants to push forward, the emasculation of men. Now, what they would say in response is, "Oh yeah, but this boy behaved really badly." Yeah, but the whole thing reinforces the idea that we have to stop violence against women and girls, and it's not a subtle point, Marilyn. Because I know people very well who have men who are strong men and successful, but who are being relentlessly destroyed by their partners to the point that they become ineffective economically and socially. They become isolated. And this sort of series which suggests that toxic masculinity, if we solve toxic masculinity, will solve abuse, is actually part of the problem.
It drives me mad. It absolutely drives me mad. I couldn't even tell you one frame of adolescence. I refused to watch it. And in fact, Mark Brooks, we did talk about adolescence, and he said exactly the same thing. He did watch it. But I said I had no interest in watching it whatsoever, and I'm glad I didn't.
It's created an entire industry with people like her. What is toxic masculinity?
It is terrible.
And on they go about this, and it's like, whether they overtly say it or not, it's all reinforcing the subliminal, actually not even subliminal message that men abuse women, full stop, that women and girls must be protected. The 5.2 million men and boys who've been abused, they can go hang. They can forget about it. The 700,000+ men who have identified themselves as being abused by their female partner, forget about them. It's all about women and girls.
But it should just say, what is a toxic relationship? Not specific about. I really can't bear that phrase. I know a lot of people that use it, toxic masculinity. I don't like. What is it to be toxic? What does that look like? Where does it start? How do you understand it? Is it in your life? You know, and as I say, I have nearly always, it's boys that come up and talk to me afterwards, and it's extraordinary. And I'm really pleased that they do open up. And of course, and a lot of them say if they're watching pornography, they'll say because it does distort their minds, it does distort their behaviour, and social media and all the stuff they're watching on that. And then Ofcom have got a lot to play. I mean, the online safety bills should be taking this stuff down.
Yeah, well, that's not what it's there for. Well, officially it's there for that. Well, I'm very dubious about what its real purpose is. But okay, I mean, it can't work anyway because you just hide your identity.
But
or you use your older brother's email or something. Whatever.
But I do feel sorry and sad for boys because they don't really know what their role is and where should they be exactly in society, and what is their place, where do they fit, if you like, and that's terrible. It's terrible.
But there's an entire industry now about this. There's the End of Misogyny Part 1, teaching by David Servant, whoever that is, and then you've got all this talk about misogyny. I found this. Then there's this word misandry, which people don't seem to like. Misandry is a female hatred of men. Misogyny is a male hatred of women, or certainly a discrimination that on the basis that women are inferior. Misandrists are females who believe that men are inferior, and yet you've got all this going on. Misogyny is a system. Misandry is a survival response. Misogyny is the architecture of civilization. Misandry is an alarm system. And then, perhaps the worst of all, misogyny has a body count. Misandry hurts your pride. Somebody actually went to the trouble of making that. And any male who's been abused will know how utterly discriminating that is. That is abusive because it encourages people to dismiss the idea that some women act as if they hate men, either an individual man or all men.
And there are a lot of women out there like it. There are a lot of adult women like it. But I mean, at the end of the day, you are right. The more children, teenagers are very they're not gullible, but they're very easily influenced by things. And
they're impressionable. They're impressionable.
Drip, 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 drip.
Yeah.
It has an impact.
I'll show you another one, which is perhaps even more direct. There's no ambiguity there. Misandry isn't real, but misogyny is.
Where on earth?
Misandry would require men to face systemic oppression, and they don't. In the US and globally, men hold most positions of power. It's nothing to do with positions of power. It's nothing to do with systemic oppression. Misandry is what a person does. Misogyny is what a person does. And this kind of thing is one of the reasons that I want us to focus on a series. And I want to work on it with you. I know we've talked about this off air as well, and with Mark Brooks, to really try to bring home the reality here. What we should be stopping isn't violence against women and girls. It's violence against victims.
And I think, it is true. People, I think the men do feel almost invisible and they trot off to work and all this. I mean, I still to this day, there are police officers that will say, why did you let a woman hit you? Well, I mean, it's not even about hitting always either. I mean, coercive control and, I mean, there's so many elements of abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, or physical abuse. There's so many different parts of it. I'm glad they've taken the word away now that used to be called domestic violence. And when I was in my marriage, I thought, well, towards the end he was violent, but during the other years, I thought, well, it's not violent. It's not domestic violence, is it? Because he's not actually hitting me. But the gaslighting, the control, the gaslighting was awful, and the financial control, and snooping and all that stuff. It's awful, and it's the same for the women that do it to men in exactly the same way, and it's awful. Let's end
on a positive note. You mentioned Mankind. This is from Mankind. The Mankind Initiative, helping men escape domestic abuse. And this is what it says, and I'll read this. It matters. Helping men escape domestic abuse. Due to increasing levels of domestic abuse, we are receiving more calls than ever, and our helpline solely relies on the public for funding. We receive no taxpayer funding or grants. If you're able to help us to help more men escape domestic abuse, please donate to us here. Thank you. The good news is there's someone to help there. I'll leave that up on the screen for a bit. Let's not take that down. Just leave it up for a minute. But the bad news is they don't get money. They don't get any of the money that's being chucked at domestic abuse because it's all tackling violence against women and girls.
Neither do I. I don't get. I mean, I do far more for nothing than I ever get paid for. And I forgot to finish the conversation about this young man that's in prison.
Oh, yeah.
So the granny reached out to Mark Brooks because she actually heard me talking to him on my show, and she heard it, and she contacted him, and one of the team actually went to the prison to meet the young man. Well, that's really something.
That's him there. That's Mark Brooks.
Yeah,
Mark
he's
Brooks,
such a nice man. And you know, and one of the team actually went out to see this young man in prison. He was desperate because, and also they wouldn't let him have his anxiety depression pills for PTSD. They wouldn't allow him to have it, even though he had the prescription there. No, they had to wait for the prison doctor to do it. So his mental health for about 5 days really nosedived. But someone from Mankind went in to see him, and that really gave him back some hope. And they are an excellent charity, and I'm fully in favour of it. And I know he wants to do this documentary, the series thing that you're talking about, Lembit. He wants to. We have to do it. We have to drag these stupid people that are so inept and so actually. And I mean, they are literally intellectually ignorant. They don't want to look at anything else to make them change their view, change their thoughts. They don't want to do it. They just, I'll just use the mantra that's out there and I'll jump on that bus. They don't want to go away and look and research and come out with a better informed decision. They'd much rather jump on let's get on that. The violence against women, let's get on that. We're all forming a misogyny thing, anti that. But they haven't got a damn clue about what the actual component parts of a toxic relationship is, and it impacts every area of your life. And you sat with some of these boys and some of these men, it would break your heart.
We've got to finish now. Where can people find out more regarding freedom from abuse?
On the website, freedom-abuse.org. And Marilyn Hawes, you'll find me. I think I'm all over. I'm all over YouTube and Google. I think it's like an open spleen, my life, quite honestly.
Too much information there. For Mankind, there we are. Mankind Initiative, helping men escape domestic abuse. Just put Mankind Initiative. You'll find them very quickly. They are a really great organization. I've been honored to work with Mark Brooks myself. He really does it sincerely. He is actually a role model because he says that he wants to stop abuse. He doesn't go on about abuse against, he focuses on abuse against men, but he gets it. He understands that the problem is abuse. And to create a to sexually discriminate against male victims is unforgivable. And as you say, it could even be illegal. I'd be interested to test of that.
I think it is illegal, Lembit, and he is working very hard, Mark, on policies to put forward to government. He really does work hard on pushing on policies and changing people's minds and trying to educate them. And that's what I do with Freedom from Abuse. Education is again, Nelson Mandela, education is the only weapon we have to change the world.
Thank you so much. Let's finish on that positive point. That's Marilyn Hawes, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Freedom from Abuse. We also spoke extensively about Mankind and the outstanding work of Mark Brooks, OBE, who really does get it. If you get it in a bad way, help is there. I advise you in the first instance to go to Mankind Initiative. They will help, and things seem less hopeless when you speak to somebody who doesn't patronize you, who doesn't say, well, you're strong enough to hit her back, who says, we've heard this before, and you are not alone. What incenses me about the current government is this relentless reinforcement of the wrong claim that abuse is all about men harming females. It's not. It's about people who seem to have failed to resolve their own traumas harming other people. It doesn't help them, and it destroys others. Abuse, in my view, is the greatest epidemic in the United Kingdom, and the most unforgivable social omission of the current government is to not treat abuse victims equally, to sexually discriminate against males who are abused. We're not going to let that happen. And in as much as I can use unprecedented TV to campaign for justice on this issue, we shall do so. Thanks very much for watching. Challenging subject. Big thanks to Marilyn Hawes and also to the team. But more than anything, thanks to you for seeing the programme through. I'll welcome your thoughts as well. I'm Lembit Öpik. That was Lembit Öpik Live on Unprecedented TV. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.
Immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The return of the sausages.